Romance at a glance. Romance at a glance.
What you say now?
Romance at a glance.
Go ahead, girl.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Authors at a Glance, Romance at a Glance. I'm your host, Bridget, and today we are talking to author Jen DeLuca. She wrote Well Met. Guys, that was her debut novel, and coming up in September is the sequel, Well Played, and we got a chance to chat with her. We reviewed her book in season 3, and it was fun, and it was sweet, and it was romantic. It gave me all the lovely rom-com feels with a steamy sex scene in the middle, which is just the best. And you guys, if you haven't checked out the book, make sure you check out the book. And also, enjoy this chat. We cover, obviously, a wide range of topics. You know that me and Shani are chatty, and we like to chat. And we go through it all and talk a lot about her writing and how she came up with the idea and how she kind of was submitting a bunch of scripts and got an agent, and this was the script that sold, and now they're interested, and she just signed a deal to do 2 more books with Berkeley. So that's super, super exciting for Jen and super exciting for all of us, because for a debut novel, it was phenomenal. And so we're only more and more excited to see what happens with her in the future. Enjoy our lovely chat. Well, hi, Jen. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm Bridget. This is my co-host, Shani.
Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we were researching, and we actually reviewed your book, Well Met, for season 3 of the podcast, but I don't think we realized when we were reviewing that it was your debut novel. That's amazing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Captain Blackthorn was my Jimmy Jam. I mean, thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
How does
welcome.
one get a captain in their life? Is this a Renaissance fair thing where we can go find strapping people in kilts? Is this a thing?
It's certainly a thing. I mean, the inspiration for the book came from me working 2 seasons as a pub wench at a local Renaissance fair. So while I personally did not, be carried off by a pirate in leather pants or anything like that, there's certainly that aspect is there. There's strapping guys in kilts, and there's hot guys with swords, and it's funny how things like that, kind of, I don't know, become very exciting when we're like, if you met these guys like at the grocery store, you wouldn't give them a second look, but then suddenly they're in like these, with the big hat and the scruff, and the beard and the vest and the leather pants and the sword, and you're just like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, wait a second.
Yeah, and like the testosterone, you just like feel it rippling through the air after them, and you're like,
oh yeah,
let me get a snack of that. That seems nice.
Oh yeah, and then of course, on the other end you have the estrogen too. You've got all the women in their corsets and hyped up to here, and there's it.
That sounds like a recipe for amazingness.
Well, so while I was volunteering at this Ren Fair, I was trying to think about Ren Fair themed romances, and I was like, I couldn't really think. I could think of a couple from like years ago, but I couldn't think of any that were current. And I thought, what, this is an untapped thing. Like this has to be. I need to do this, and so I did.
Were you like writing in a ton of different things before this, and then this was the idea that sort of stuck that you were able to sell to Berkeley, I guess, as it ended up being?
Yeah, I pretty much. I'm one of those people that's been writing, as long as I can remember, and certain things were certainly better than others. And I just I got my agent with a different book that went out, made the rounds, and didn't sell. So that was a few months of sadness. And then while that was happening, I started this one, and this was the one that sold. So, yeah.
That's so exciting.
Nice. I mean,
it was very exciting.
We both love this book. So like, we were like, that's her debut novel out the gate is such a good book. Like, who gets that?
Well, honestly, like when I finished this and it was time to like send it out, I remember kind of thinking, okay, if this doesn't sell, I don't know what I'm going to do, because this is the best thing I've written. Like this, you know what I mean? Like you sort of have that feeling of this is special. Uh-huh. And so I was sort of like, okay, if this doesn't hit, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's next, because I felt like I put what I could into this.
Did you know ahead of time and like kind of map out the series already? Like you had it in your mind where the next books would go? Or did you just like finish this book and then they were like, hey, we love this book, you should make more in this world?
Kind of a little bit of both. As I'd finished writing this one and we started to send it out, I sort of thought, okay, I could do other things with these characters, because there's these supporting characters, and I thought, okay, I can write their stories. I didn't have it perfectly mapped out. I had sort of some vague ideas, which is what is ending up coming to pass. But so I was able to kind of flesh those ideas out. But it was a very pleasant surprise that they wanted a series. And I'm very, very happy that it's happening, because I'm having so much fun just hanging out with these characters over and over.
Nice.
I was a big fan of the fact that, like, when we read the beginning, we thought it was going to be a love triangle with her and Simon and what's his face, who now escapes me right now as I'm talking
Mitch,
to you.
the guy in the kilt?
Mitch, of course. Yeah. And we loved that it turned out that he was just like a solid dude who thought, hey, you might need a friend because you're new in our town and you seem cool. So I wanted to invite you out with me and my friends. Like, I thought that was one of the sweetest parts of the whole story. Was that something that was like always there? You're like, oh, he's never going to be in the picture? Or was it something that evolved?
It definitely evolved. I'd like to tell a story about Mitch, because when I was plotting the book out, I'm definitely somebody who plots my books. I do outlines and follow the outlines when I'm writing. And originally he was supposed to be the antagonist. He was supposed to be like the overgrown, dude who never left town, that's reliving his glory days of high school, calls everybody bro and fist bumps everybody. But he was sort of had this like, ongoing kind of, I don't want to say rivalry, but he and Simon were never really friends, like growing up. And so they sort of always had that kind of, frenemy sort of vibe where they work together doing this run fair, but they're not buds, And so I had this idea of, he was going to be, he was going to see that Simon and Emily were getting together, and then he was going to horn in on that just because he could. And that was my original idea. And then, so he was going to be a jerk, basically. And then as I was writing, every time he came on the page, he'd show up, he'd start fist bumping the kids, he'd say something funny. He would just be this, really fun guy, and he wouldn't be a jerk. And I was like, will you work with me here? Like, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And then, so I was just like, well, let's see what happens. So I kind of just kept writing and trying to figure out what to do with it. And then I got to the scene where, where she meets him at the bar, and he's like, why don't you go over to Simon's house and talk to him? And I was like, oh, he ships it. And I realized that all along that made so much more sense and was so much more rich as a character for him to be someone that's known this guy all his life. And it's like, no, you're really good for him. And why don't you go talk to him? Why don't you go over there? And kind of pushes her in his direction. So he was a character that was not the way I had planned him to be, but turned out so much better. So he's definitely a favorite.
That's awesome. He really did, actually. And I think on the podcast, in the last season, we talked a lot about kind of one-dimensional villains that we were encountering a lot in stories. So it was very surprising and like a pleasant surprise to like not have that character come in and be kind of that quintessential, like locked in a box and is mean for no reason, and you're trying to figure out why, and like
Well, and that's something to me that it is fun when I'm writing, is to kind of take something like that first idea, and then kind of say, how can I make that different? Maybe that's good for the first draft. And then when I'm going back and looking at it later, say, how can I make that more interesting, or how can I give that more depth? And because that to me makes for more interesting characters.
Well, that makes sense, because you just, you said that you used to do theater. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever had to sit down and do your given circumstances of your characters, like where they come from, what is their background, what are they scared of, what are their phobias, like filling all that out just so that your character has depth, even though you're never going to write about all that stuff that you're talking about. Right. Now you kind of know what's triggering your character as they go along. Do you actually do that with your characters in the book, or is that just something you kind of have in the back of your mind?
I kind of have it in the back of my mind. When I'm writing a first draft, that's when I'm really getting to know them and getting to, figuring out what makes them tick. And then kind of when I'm kind of pausing between drafts and I really think about things that might have come up while I'm writing dialogue or something, I'm like, okay, why did they say that? And figuring out kind of, that makes me figure out their backstory. And then, that helps me, then that helps me inform their character when I'm writing the second draft, because like I said, I'm figuring them out when I'm writing them. So by the time I get to the end of a first draft, I know them so much better. And then I go back to the beginning and they're so like cardboard because I don't know really who they are yet. They're just sort of doing the things I tell them to in their outline. And then now I know why they're doing these things and I can like flesh that out and make that, you know, a little more interesting than just they're doing it because the outline says so.
Is there one part of writing that's like your favorite part? Like, is it the first kiss? Is it the first sex scene? Is it the first, you know, the meet cute? Like, is there one moment, the happily ever after, that is your favorite?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know if there's one particular moment. I think actually I like the ending. I like the epilogue, you know, where you kind of, you're putting the button on the end, on the whole story, and you just sort of see everybody and they're happy and it's good. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing that I love about romance. And that's why I read it and that's why I write it, is because you get that ending that you know is going to be good and everybody's going to be happy.
Of course. That's why we do too. I don't want these ambiguous cliffhanger nonsense. I want to know everyone is happy and they're going to live happily ever after and everything's going to be okay.
So I think actually, I like writing that sort of big sigh of relief that's at the end where you know everybody's happy. That's probably my favorite part to really write. And then everything is aiming towards that. Everything else you write is aiming towards that.
So you said you're an outliner, obviously pre-COVID, because right now you're probably just writing at your house because you can't go anywhere. But are you someone who gets like energy from writing in a cafe and sort of people watching, or are you like more of an at home, have to be away from distractions?
Kind of both. I mean, there are certain scenes, like when I'm getting to the sex scene or when I'm getting to like big emotional scenes, like the black moment or something like that. Those I kind of have to do at home by myself. Like I even tell my husband, like right now I'm telling my husband, go away, just go away, leave me alone for the day. Don't talk to me so I can get this written. And those I would write at home, but I'm definitely somebody who loves going out to like the library or to like, you know, the cafes and just kind of for that change of scenery. I love that. Or even going to like, you know, parks or something, if there's somewhere like a picnic table that I can sit on. And if it's a nice day, I mean, I'm in Florida, so right now that's not a thing you're going to want to do.
Oh
but because it's a million degrees outside, but you know, when it's nice out, just to give that, I like to have that change of scenery. So right now with all the COVID, it's been crazy to just be sort of cooped up.
Shawnee's also in Florida right now.
Oh my goodness. Are you in Florida? Yeah, I'm in Florida. I'm stuck here for the moment, for another month. And
where in Florida are you? Or are we allowed to talk about that?
I'm at my parents'.
She's like, you know, ratting out a mob boss or anything. She's just visiting her parents.
So
and got
romance. But a mob boss would have been better because that's so romance. I feel like
I would have been nice.
You know, and his name would be Dimitri because I love the Russian mafia ones.
Of course,
Totally.
But no, I'm in Coral Springs. I just say Miami because that's actually where I'm from. But I'm in Coral Springs right now, and nobody knows where that is. So, but yes, I'm ready definitely for a change of scenery. When COVID started, I was actually super happy because I'm at my parents' house. I have like zero responsibilities. I'm like, It's like being a teenager, but your parents don't tell you what to do. Like, that's how I felt for like the last months. But now Bridget's my creating partner. So not only do we do this podcast, but we just play and we make stuff and we film a lot. So like not having your play buddy is like, it's like, I want to go outside. I want to play. You know?
Our list of ideas is becoming real preposterous because, I mean, thankfully we do short form, so it's easier. Like, I can't imagine if we were partners who wrote novels because, like, they take so much longer to create. We do shorter form, so we can like film it in a whole night, you know, sort of things. But
there you go. I put it this way: I had my partner take a wig from my house and drop it on Bridget's doorstep so we could film each other via online, like, or whatever.
Oh my God.
So that's the way we live our lives.
What's neat about this whole thing, though, is it's like kind of making people be more creative with a lot of things, you know, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, you know, you got to find the fun or the good parts in this whole mess, right?
I think it's like TikTok exploded.
Oh God,
because now you had a lot of people like millennial age who had to work and do a lot of stuff who were just home, and they were like, well, move over, Gen Z. We're getting on TikTok.
Exactly.
So that's really cool. I'm actually really curious to know. So when I write, I get a bit attached to a character too. Have you found that there is like a character you wrote who you just love or you like connected with the best?
One of my critique partners said that Simon is a gender flipped me, which I thought was pretty funny. And she wasn't wrong. I'm very much a list making kind of person. But no, I really did. I identified a lot with him and just, I don't know if I identified a lot with him, but I definitely fell in love with him, with the way that he's very kind of closed off and doesn't talk to people. So it takes effort to get to know him. And I just fell in love with him when I wrote him, and he was just so much fun to write, and so much fun, then when he gets to be the pirate and gets to be a completely different person. I just had a great time writing him. And then I also kind of, with losing his brother, I sort of used him as a way to sort of talk about grief, that I experienced, like when I lost my mother a few years back. So I sort of put a little bit of myself into him that way. So that made me feel very close to him as well.
Yeah, I thought the interesting thing is how many people misinterpret him because he's closed off and like doesn't share. Everyone just puts their own assumptions on. I mean, this is like a classic humanity problem. But I always think it's very interesting when you read a character like that and you're like, but just tell her what's going on and it will all be okay.
Just have a conversation. And that kind of thing always annoys me when I'm reading books too, sometimes, where it's that just you guys would just sit down and talk for 5 minutes. But like in reality, that's real life. Happen. Certainly in drama, in fiction, you have that, well, if they just talk to each other, but why, at what point are you going to walk up and say, I'm really working with some grief issues here, and I have been for a few years, so let's have a conversation. Nobody's going to talk about that.
Yeah. What's really funny though? Like, okay, so I'm in a situation where I just got into kink starting last year, so I'm fairly new to it. But one of the huge things is communicating, because obviously some situations might be slightly more unsafe or whatever. So I've gotten really good at communicating with my partner in the year. And in the books, I have that same thing where I'm like, if you guys just communicated, like, why is nobody saying anything? And I find that like, I tried to like apply the same dynamics to like myself, right? Which is like, I'm really blunt and I'm actually really good at communicating. However, there are certain situations where words just get stuck. Like you want to communicate them so badly, and there's just something that happens in your throat that just won't let them pass, Right. And the more time that goes by, the harder it is to say that, because the other person's gonna go, why didn't you just tell me?
Why didn't we talk about this 6 months ago? Yeah.
Yeah, but there's still those things I find that I can't. It's very hard for me to say.
Yeah. No, and I think that's very true. And I think also when you have characters, if they're having a conversation where they're kind of pushing each other's buttons and emotions get heightened, you're not going to be having a rational conversation because you're upset. So it's a big deal to sit down and have that 5-minute rational conversation. And sometimes characters can't do it.
Yeah. Plus, you don't want to hurt the other person either. So you're like trying to filter how you're saying something without hurting them too, which is tricky. And also, again, something that we're making up in our own mind. Maybe we wouldn't even care, but
right.
Well, I also find that past terrible conversations affect my new paradigm, right? So in the past, when I expressed a need, it was met with ego or aggression or not whatever. So even though my new partner is not going to meet me with those same things, my body is gun shy immediately when those topics come up. So I was trying to think of solutions. Like when you're writing a book, how do you get around this whole communication thing? Like a 3-minute conversation would have solved this entire book in 2 seconds. How do you get around that? How do you write around that? Or whatever. So it was just an interesting kind of thought thread, but you did it beautifully in your book. I was like,
I tried. But yeah, I really do think that it's for me, it's about, when they're having that big breakup, towards the end before they get it together. To me, it's about them they're both kind of resisting that big change that leads to the end of the book. And it's about, each of them bringing up that one thing that they're lacking or that one thing that's hurt them, and they can't see past it. At that point, at that point when you're seeing red, you can't talk like a rational human being. And so if two people are seeing red, they're not going to be able to talk and hash it out. And then it's just more like, F you, we're out of here. And, and it's over. And,
yeah.
But then, it's not over because it's a romance.
Yes. I have a question. You mentioned your husband a little bit earlier. And I'm very curious to know, because I wasn't allowed to read romance novels growing up. And so I'm always very curious as to when you decided to become a romance novel author. How did your family respond? How did your partner respond? Like, how did that go for you?
Fine. Honestly, it wasn't even a thing. My husband thinks it's cool that I'm writing. He thinks it's cool that I sold a book. He's the most supportive. Honestly, one of the happiest moments of my life was when I came home and I told him that I sold a book, and he was just a look on his face. He was so happy for me because he knows how hard I worked to get to that point, and he really appreciated it. You know what I mean? How you hear sometimes about spouses not really getting what you do or whatever, but he's always been super supportive. He's always been, why don't you go write for a little while or something? He knows it's something that I need to do, and it's something that's very important to me. So he's always been really supportive. The fact that it's romance, I don't think is a big deal to him. He read Well Met. I'm trying to remember when he read it. It was right before. I think maybe the arcs were out, so maybe he read a bit. And that was a little weird. I will say it was a little weird to have your husband reading your sex scenes, but he liked it. He was because I even paper clipped shut that chapter. It's just in case you don't want to read that, I'm just going to close this for you. But he was like, no, I read it and he liked it and everything. So, he's fine with it. Family's fine with it. I've got, really supportive family. I feel very fortunate. I really do. Even coworkers and stuff. Once I, let them know what I was doing and everything, they were all super supportive. So it's been great, honestly, knock on wood, but.
Let's talk about that sex and sex in general, because that is me and Sean's favorite topic. Obviously, that's why we run a romance novel podcast.
Yes, okay.
It's actually why we don't ask that question at the beginning, because once we go there, sometimes we stay there.
Gotcha. Okay. Now that we're all warmed up, yeah.
Yeah.
We're warmed up. Everybody's foreplay.
Yes. Foreplay is done. We got into some emotional things, and now we have gotten closer, and it's time to have sex.
It's time for lizard brain.
Yes. First of all, we loved when she goes over, and it all worked. It was all working. Excellent use of condom usage. Sometimes in contemporary, condom usage can be really overbearing, and it's okay, we get it. We're having safe sex. Just mention it real fast and let's move along. I don't need to.
Well, to me, that's part of it. And that's kind of the way, that's the way that it's always kind of been for me. I'm a Generation X. I grew up, when, safe during the AIDS thing. So, condom usage was second nature. It wasn't even a consideration.
Oh my God, that's a cattail. I was what is that? You guys, her cat's tail is dipping in and out of the frame. And I was like, is she using a boom mic?
No.
You can tell we're in production because my first thought was, oh, she has a boom mic.
No, a terrible, terrible cat. There she is.
And then I was like, wait a minute, the boom mic is moving.
I was like, is your husband right there holding the boom mic?
Yes, that's happening. That's happening. It's very professional here at my house.
Your cat is I don't give a crap that you're taking.
She does not. She has to show. Every time I do anything on Zoom or whatever, she has to show up. Anyway, sorry, we were talking about condom. But
that was hilarious.
I think it's important to have it in a sex scene because if I'm reading a sex scene and there's no condom, I'm like, okay, well, you're pregnant. I'm just waiting for that part of the book to happen at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't think it's a big. But I also don't think it's a big deal to use one. It's just okay, I've got a condom and I'm using it.
Right.
Period. And honestly, at this point, I'm trying to think because I'm currently drafting the third book, but there's usually at least one joke about the condom at some point, in the, because I also think you need to joke around during sex. I think that's important.
All the time. all the time. That's the best book because
if you can't laugh during sex,
if you can't laugh during sex, you're doing it. Something's wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not yucking anyone's yum. If you like to have very serious sex, do you? But
to me, that shows how close the characters are. If they're doing something that intimate, but they're also joking around with each other, because that shows on another level how connected they are. So it's not just a sexual connection, but a sense of humor connection. So yeah. Oh God, if you joke around during a sex scene, I'm all yours.
Yeah. You know what's funny is like I used to never joke around during sex in general, like in life, right? And so very recently, like the newest partner I have, he is very joking and I'm very joking. I don't know why I just never joked during sex. But I remember like something happened and I was like, come on, grandma, or whatever. And it was the funniest shit ever. Oh my God. I was like, why have I never joked during sex? This is great. Talking shit during sex is the most amazing thing ever.
Big time. Big time.
For sure. How do you decide? Is it like because I know you said you outlined your book. So is it a decision where you're like, okay, they'll get together in this chapter because that makes the most sense for that arc. And then they'll get together again in this chapter for a sex scene. Is it something where you've kind of plotted out where they're going to happen? Or is it like, I know one will happen and then the rest sort of organically follow?
I'll say that I know when the first one's going to happen, because to me, that's when I outline, it's a very generic outline. It's very bullet points kind of thing, but it's sort of, this sort of scene happens, then they're going to kiss here, then this stuff happens. This will be where the first sex scene is going to be, and it's just another plot point, on the way to the end of the book. But like for Well Met, there's the one sex scene that's at the specific, probably around, I think it's around like the 60% mark or so. It's a kind of a slow burn of a book. And then later on, there's sort of more of an implied sex scene. It's not really explicit, but they're definitely doing it. That was not like outlined, that that particular part, because that comes right after the part where he's, giving her all the roses, the whole wooing thing at the fair. Literally that part of the outline said they are a couple at fair and they're cute. That was all I did. So I had to figure that out later, what that actually meant. And so just having that whole scene happen, the stuff that comes before it, where he realizes that no one's ever treated her the way that she deserves. And so he's going to show her, how he feels about her. And then the whole thing happens with the roses. And so having that flow into another sex scene made sense, for the story.
Yeah, if someone was wooing my ass off at a fair while dressed as Captain Blackthorn and brought me roses, we would be having sex
like a tree too.
Like a tree.
That's kind of a given. So yeah, I mean, it made sense. And I'm definitely one of those people that, I believe that a sex scene has to, move the story forward. I don't like to throw them in just to throw them in. I want there to be a reason for it. It changes the characters in some way and it moves the plot forward in some way. So yeah.
Have you ever had to rein it back? Have you ever had to go like, oh man, I think I put too many sex scenes. It's not.
No, not yet. I think honestly, when you look at the grand scheme of romance novels, I'm probably one of the tamer ones. I'm not really over the top, bang fest or anything. I definitely, the door is definitely open, but that's not the point of it. For me, I personally am a rom-com banter dialogue kind of person. That's sort of my favorite part to write. And I think the sex is important and I'm not going to skip it. I'm definitely not going to be a closed door kind of person, but I'm not. Thank God. Yeah. I guess that frustrates me when I read. I get that's for, some people aren't into that. Some people like the closed door romances, but if you're giving me banter and you're giving me sexual tension, and then the chapter ends and it fades to black, I am going to scream my face off. That hates me.
We're like, it's not a romance novel if you close the door. I'm not here for closed doors.
I recently read a book, and so beautiful job building the tension and the chemistry, and I was for it. And then they got to the point and it was like, and what happened next was just between us two. And I was like, no! What about me?
I don't freaking think so. I've been along on the ride with you all this time.
Well, it's interesting because I always remember like the first play I ever directed, right? I probably wasn't good with emotion as a person in general at that point. And so there's a point where the character cries. And I had her turn her back to the audience. And I always remember my professor coming to me afterwards, like he was critiquing it, whatever, and saying like, no, when she cries, she should be dead to the audience. You don't get to take them on this journey and then not let them see all of that emotion and all of that, whatever. And to me, when you are reading a romance novel, you're kind of God. You're like overlooking this entire story. And so to like close the door on God, be like, hold on a second, God, I'm about to
close the door on
for a
God.
minute. You know what I'm saying? You're just like, well, how rude. Okay.
Right? God's not going to look fondly on that. So yeah, you don't want to piss off God.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in this case, the readers who will buy subsequent books.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Because if you close the door on me, I will not. And the thing is, like, I can love your book. I can love it so much, and I will not buy another book if the door is closed. Because that's not why I'm here. But Bridget and I always kind of debate.
It's too short.
Yeah. But I specifically, like, Bridget and I we're kind of opposite. She wants the feels. She wants the open door too, but she's there for the romance and all the feels. And I'm like, where's the smut?
Yeah.
Where is it? How many pages till I get there, Bridget? How many pages?
Okay. Like, flips through it to see where the banging starts. And
yes,
okay.
But I'll go back.
We told this story recently, but Shawnee will when she was little, I mean high school, used to photocopy the smut out of books at the library and take it home with her.
Or the worst part that Bridget hates me for is that I used to tear out the sex scenes from the books and take them home.
Desecration of books. Everyone, you can't see Jen, but she's shaking her face and her hand is over her face. And she also agrees with me that's preposterous, Shawnee.
As an adult, I realize what an asshole. What an ass. What a douche.
That's amazing.
But yeah, I am 100% the rom-com feels, but I also just want to know who's licking who where and what's happening. I just want to be involved. I just want to be a part of the party, just tell me what's happening.
Absolutely. And that to me, and like I said, to me, that's important. It's because that's an important part of the character too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's how they are in bed. So yeah.
How does that function with an editor? So my thoughts are thus, because we work in a lot of different mediums. So I have people constantly like critiquing my work and giving me notes and things like that. And I just don't care. I'm like, best idea. Okay. I like that. Sometimes I'm like, your idea is terrible. I'm not taking that advice, but thank you for giving it. But I imagine that when an editor's involved, because they're like, quote unquote, the man, they are like aware of how many times you say, penis or vagina or anal or whatever.
Right.
And they're like, oh, actually you have to do XYZ. How is that?
Honestly, I didn't get a whole lot of like critique on the sex scenes themselves, which I'm going to say is a good thing.
Good thing.
In the second book, Well Played, that comes out in September, my editor actually gave me a note and she was like, this is very, I can't remember exactly what she said, like there was a very sweet sex scene and very true to the characters, which I thought was a really cool thing for her to say. Like, it told me that she got who the characters were. And I remember her giving me that note at the end of the scene itself. But I haven't had a lot of like notes like, well, maybe the hand should be here or something like that. I haven't had anything along those lines. So like either I'm doing it right or they're just letting me do what I need to do with it.
Have you found that when you turned in the version that you sold to the editor, is that pretty close to the version that was published, or did it kind of evolve as you worked with their team?
It was pretty close. We did, my editor is fantastic. She, Carrie Donovan at Berkeley, she, one thing I love about her is that she really gets the characters, and I really think she loves them as much as I do. So when we first sold Well Met, and she and I first talked about the book and she gave me notes, it was very much about just sort of deepening the characters, just adding a lot of little things to make them richer, even like adding the little detail about Simon being a long distance runner was something that we added in like later on in the process as a way to like contrast him to his brother being the football star. And it worked well for Simon to be a runner because he's a loner, he's quiet, he doesn't want the applause. So that would be a sport. That would be something that he would be very into. And then it's this like minor detail that I've brought up like a couple more times. It comes up in the second book and it comes up in the third book. And then it just like, and I was sort of one of those things that's like, I can't even believe that he was never that, because it worked so well. So it was a lot of little details like that, lots of little, just little details about the fair to make it more, not realistic is the word, but to make you see it more atmospheric, I guess maybe is the word I'm looking for. But she has just had a lot of places where it was like, expand on this here a little bit more, or, just give me a little more moments of that. So it was mostly that sort of thing, as opposed to like, let's rehaul this entire section, which was nice.
Do you, I'm curious, I have a story that I've been like very low pressure writing for a very long time, but every so often I take what I have and I sit around the table with my siblings and I tell them the story and we talk it out and they pick every hole in it and give me all sorts of suggestions. And I find that I've never asked like an author really this, like when you talk to your editor, they may give you notes, but do you have the opportunity to really like overhaul your story with somebody, tell them and get real like other sort of feedbacks? Is it a really solo process? Like, how does that work for you?
I work really closely with critique partners. I have like 3 people that I really, really trust, that we've kind of developed a process at this point that as I'm writing, like when I'm writing that first draft, that's absolute garbage, I'm sending it to them as I'm writing it chapter by chapter. And their role at that point is to not criticize me, is to not say anything bad, but is to just sort of see what I'm doing. And then by the time I get to the end and they see where the story's gone, then I'll kind of go back and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking about changing. And then they can, since they've read the whole thing, they can help me kind of brainstorm plot points. And that to me is so helpful. And it's also really motivating, because writing a novel, by yourself is really difficult, because it's not, I actually came up through fan fiction, like I think a lot of other people did. And you throw that stuff online and you're getting comments and you're getting, kudos and likes and stuff. And that's very, affirming. But when you're sitting down and it's you and your laptop and you've got 85,000 words to write, that can get really, really lonely. And you can have a lot of, is this garbage? Maybe I should just stop because it's garbage. But to have, people that you trust and you're sending them chapters and they're like, okay, send me more. They're kind of, part of their role is to be on my back to get me to finish, because a first draft is the hardest part for me. Once I have finished the first draft, I love to revise because I figured out who the characters are. I figured out what they need to do, and I can go back in and rewrite it super quick. But dragging a first draft out of me is like pulling teeth. So I have those people that, cheer me along the way and say nice things about my writing, and they pick out the good stuff. And then once I'm done, they're like, okay, now here's the plot holes. Here are the things that you need to fix. So that's super helpful. Super helpful to me. I would not be able to get it done without them.
Do you write full time right now?
Right now, yeah, I do. That was mostly a circumstantial thing. My husband got a job about a year ago, and we moved to a different town. So I was able to stay home and be the quote unquote housewife while he worked. And so then I write. So that's kind of my thing. And then we're actually getting ready to move across country. So that's a whole other story. But
congratulations.
Where you going? Where you headed?
We're going to Tucson, Arizona. So that's
nice.
going to be an adventure with 3 cats in an SUV. But
yeah, you're like the wettest of the wet heat to the driest of the dry
I know.
heat.
We're actually kind of looking forward to the desert. We think it'll be an interesting adventure. But
let me tell you right now, dry heat is way better than wet heat.
It is.
Yeah, we went out there a few months ago to check it out because he had a couple of job prospects out there. So we wanted to see if we liked the area, and we both loved it. So then, and then it was like right before COVID happened, and then it was like, well, and of course, and he had all these like job prospects that were just like falling off one by one because, as the country shut down. And then we just sort of have been hunkering down here. And then he got a call a few weeks ago. And so now we're moving to Arizona. And I'm going to be writing there full time as well. So I'm super excited about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Shani and
nice.
I are also well, I have children, she does not, but work from home, work on our own projects full time. We contract out for other people, but
nice.
It's great. We also have wonderfully supportive partners too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's key.
Got that fun cash money.
It's interesting because my like a previous partner, I remember having this discussion with him one day, and he was like, you got to find, you needed like a real job. You need a real job. And I was like, well, I already knew, like, I'm an artist. I create music and other stuff. And he was like, yeah, but what are you going to do that like, brings in money? And in my mind, I'm like, art and other stuff,
Yeah.
And I remember one day just like looking at him and being like, oh, I'll never be able to feel fully like supported here. Like this won't work. And I just turned to him and I was like, we should just break up. And he looked at me and he was like, wait, what? We were literally just like, we were like laying in bed reading a book. Like it was an average day. And I was just like, God. Yeah. I was like, yeah, we need to break up now. And he was so shocked. He didn't even say anything at first. It took him a minute to be like, wait, what's happening? And I was like, I'm just going to leave tomorrow. And then I just bought a plane ticket. The next day I just left.
Oh my God.
that was that.
Wow. That's freaking awesome though.
Guess what? I'm making money at doing art and other stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like for me, it worked out. I mean, the way this whole thing with COVID happened, my husband had left his job like right before COVID happened. So job hunting during this was a bad idea, but we didn't know. But the way it all worked out was that I had just turned in a book. So I got some book money, and then I had just signed a contract for 2 more books. So I got some, in advance, some of the advance on that. So that was money that we had thrown into the savings account. So we've been kind of able to live off of that for the past couple of months, which has been awesome. Coming in super, super handy. So it was just like, thank the Lord, people like these Rent Fair stories. So,
well, congrats on signing for 2 more books. Good for you.
Yeah. Book 3 is being drafted right now, and then I'm figuring out what book 4 is going to be.
Woohoo!
I'm very curious. Have you? Has anybody approached you for adapting your work into like for TV or film?
I do have a film agent, and there's it's being like kind of shopped around right now, but nothing tangible yet.
I think it would be speaking as people who come from the film industry, I would watch the shit out of this movie.
I mean, I think it would be fun. I would love to see it.
Yeah, like the people, everyone's dressed up. Like it's like it would be, the budget wouldn't be high because you could do it in one small town. You could build out your own fair. Just speaking as someone who like comes from the numbers side of it, I'm like, I could produce this movie as long as you're not casting Brad Pitt. Like we could do this pretty
right.
Yeah. I was on Netflix the other day and I needed like something to watch that was a no-brainer. And I don't know why, but I picked this Christmas movie called The Cinderella Story or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. But I watched the whole thing because I obviously was doing something else while I did it. And I remember thinking at the end of it, like, what's the budget? Like, well, I wonder what budget they had. But I'm like, the same budget they had for this movie, they could make well met. Like,
I would think so, right?
They could. And I was just like, you can have better writing than this movie with the same budget. You know what I mean? Yeah. It all takes place in a small,
To me, that's the dream. I would love to see it. I really, really would. It would be really fun. It would be really interesting to see what someone else would do with the story,
I support this.
So yeah, cross your fingers and, send it out there.
So Shani only listens to audiobooks. Because this was your first book. So we've talked to people who are like indie authors who like control their whole sort of audiobook. We've talked to established authors who at the beginning didn't control anything, but as they've gone along, now they get to pick the sort of narrator. Mm-hmm. Did you get to be involved in the narrator choice in the audiobook at all, or did it just sort of show up in your email one day?
I was involved in that. I get to have like approval of the narrator. So they said, I got an email saying this is who we're thinking about using. And it's Brittany Presley. And I went online and I listened to a bunch of samples of her work. And I loved her voice. And she had this great, like almost snarky kind of quality to her voice. And I was like, she's going to be perfect for Emily. So I thought she was great. And I thought she really knocked it out of the park. I listened to most of the audiobook. I didn't listen to my sex chapter. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, man. That was too weird for me to listen to my own like writing. No, I couldn't do it. I thought
I would have gotten a bottle of wine. I would have been all into it. I would have loved it so much.
It was weird enough. I mean, maybe this is a debut author thing and I'll get used to it in time, but it was weird enough listening to someone just read my book, you know, I remember there's certain like passages and I'm like, I remember the coffee shop I was writing this in. Like, I remember what, you know, my laptop looked like when I was typing those words, and now they're in a book and now someone's narrating it. And it was just such a weird, like out of body experience kind of feeling that I got super emotional about it. And so by the time I got to the sex chapter, I was like, I can't do this. I think I got like partway through the scene and I had to nope out of it. I was just like, I can't. I mean, I'm sure she did a fantastic job, but I just couldn't do it. So, but like,
nope.
But one thing that I thought was, I don't know, I didn't think about the audiobook when I wrote the book. So I didn't think that not only was this poor narrator going to have to do all of these characters, but then she's going to have to do all these characters with their character accents. So, so this woman like played like 20 different people or something. Like I was like, oh my God, this was amazing. So I thought what she did was incredible. I was like, I'm not a huge audiobook person. Just because I haven't for a long time. I haven't had like a long commute or any time to really listen to audiobooks. Like I don't have any specific time that I would listen to them. So that's not really my thing. So it wasn't something that I thought a lot about, but besides knowing that there would be one, you know. So just hearing what she did with it and how she brought all of these characters to life was amazing to me. Like my favorite part of the audiobook, honestly, if you don't mind me rambling on, but my favorite part of the audiobook is when Caitlin, the niece, comes to get Emily for the fake hand fasting thing. And she's in character, but she's terrible. So she's just kind of doing this, oh, you have to come over here. And it's just like, to me, I just about fell out laughing because I was like, it's so awesome how she made this teenage character sound like a doofus and she's trying to do an accent and she's failing, but she's trying. And to me, that was so funny. So I just thought she did such a good job. I adore her. I really do.
That's awesome. Shani really liked the audiobook. I remember when we reviewed. We've definitely had some where we've had like the opposite experience where like the characters didn't turn out right. So it's super fun.
And it changes everything about the book when the narrator is not right. We definitely, Bridget and I had a book where where she was like, I love this book. And I was like, I didn't love this book. Like the main character was a douchebag. And she was like, no, he wasn't. I was like, he was a bro. He was definitely a bro. And she was like, no, I didn't read him that way at all. But I don't choose how I hear that character. It's given to me, you know?
Okay.
And so it changed everything about the book. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always do the audio. She always does the book. And so it was definitely a differing opinion just purely based on performance. So that was
interesting. That's true though. Mm-hmm. And there have been a couple of audiobooks that I've listened to recently. And there was one that I did not like it because I didn't think, the narrator wasn't doing it for me. And I was like, he's making the girl sound like a doofus. And, you know, I don't think she's supposed to be. And
I always find that, because I produced audiobooks for a while. And I always find that women narrators tend to do men better than men do women.
Yeah. And that was the problem with the one that I listened to. And I'm not going to say what it was, but yeah, it was like the male voice, you know, in the men's POV doing the women's dialogue. And she sounded like an idiot. Oh, wow, I'm a woman. Like, and it just, and maybe that's just a handicap that is going to come with a man trying to do a woman's voice without sounding weird. I don't know. But that's interesting. And like I said, since audiobooks aren't really my world, it's been an interesting kind of, I don't know, education to learn about all of this sort of thing and how
it also sounds like your narrator did her homework, you know, like read the book and went through it. And I think you can also tell when whoever the narrator or the producers, whoever's doing it, has gone through and marked the characters and really taken the time to give direction on what the characters sound like and where they're coming from. Because I think you can really tell the difference in a book that's just kind of straight read without that, or has that kind of detail put into it.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It really does.
Is there a question that you wish during, because I presumably you're going now into press for the next book, which is going to certainly look much different than it would have if we weren't in COVID, because I imagine book panels and things, a lot of them will be virtual now, and signings will be digital or somehow, I don't know how that will happen. Is there a question that you wish during all these interviews that interviewers would ask you about you or about your writing or books?
Oh my gosh. No, because I think honestly, most of the people that I've talked to at this point, I haven't had like tons and tons of interviews, but people do a pretty good job of asking, some really good questions. I've had a good time talking about my experiences at Renaissance fairs, which, like I said, was really the inspiration for writing the book. Sometimes I wish people would ask a little bit more about the actual Renaissance fair experience, but because one thing that I think is important, because I've had a couple of readers say this to me, is that they are Renaissance fair enthusiasts and they're really happy with the way I portrayed it. And that wasn't something that I even thought about when I wrote the book, because I came from a place of being, a Renaissance fair volunteer. So it was a world that I liked and I was familiar with and I really enjoyed. And I worked with people who had made it their world. And I didn't realize it until people were saying that to me, that a lot of times when people are portrayed this way, when you've got the brother-in-law who's a Ren Fair enthusiast, it's a joke. It's portrayed as some kind of a one-note way to make him seem wacky or make him seem stupid. And so I do enjoy the times that I get to talk a little bit more about, my Ren Fair experiences and how positive it is and how much fun it is, without it being a joke.
Absolutely.
So that to me was that was a dimension of the book that I didn't really even realize as I was writing it. Cause I was like, well, of course it's not a joke. But then I kind of thought about it and was like, wow, they have a really good point. And so, so I'm glad that I wrote it this way. And I'm glad, I think that it's a part of, kind of nerd culture or geek culture that, which is kind of, I think, becoming a little more popular these days. Kind of celebrating who you are.
I think you're right about that. I think when I was a kid, I used to cosplay.
Yeah.
And back then when you cosplayed, it was much more of a joke thing, or you were kind of weird for doing it,
right.
I mean, no lie though, I looked crazy dressed like Sailor Moon. But now all the costumes are really, really good. Before you were trying to find the best of a thing. But it's more accepted to be into cosplay or to be in these communities, and people are very supportive of it. I'm curious because you kind of mentioned earlier that you're essentially an introvert, or you and I'm curious to know, I personally am also an introvert, and I have a very hard time balancing being productive at something and also having to do press or promote or do social media and those two things. So kind of how does it work for you when you are writing, but also have to be on and promoting and with people and kind of out of your bubble?
I guess I just sort of schedule them, if that makes sense. I make sure that I have time to write that's, separate from when I should be doing promo. Of course, I say that and I sit down to write and then I promptly go on Twitter. So, like just about everybody else. So that's kind of probably a normal thing to do. But a lot of I try to keep the promo stuff, I don't want to say as simple as possible, but I mean, you pretty much find me on Twitter all the time, and that's where most of my promo is, because I like to hang out there. But last year was kind of crazy because I did go to a lot of in-person events, which was very, very exciting and a little overwhelming as somebody who's pretty introverted and a debut novelist. That was crazy. That to me was, I was at some of these panels and discussions and people came to see me, and that was strange. I was not ready for that. And so I had to, go lie down in a dark room afterwards for a little while, but, as an introvert, but I think, and I don't know if it's extroverted introvert or something like that, where I can turn it on and I can be, social, and I like meeting people and I like doing things. I'll have a panic attack beforehand, but then I'll show up at the event and I'll have a great time, so that's kind of how I am. And then, so I just sort of, devote the energy to that and then have a little bit of a rest, and then I can get back to writing. And that's a completely different, mindset to have.
Very nice. So we are wondering, when you're working on a character whose either race or ethnicity or nationality is different from your own, what do you do to prepare for writing those characters?
I will say that, because something that I feel like I want to address is that the Well Met series is pretty straight and white, which I think is probably pretty obvious when you read it. And it's something that I'm very conscious of. It's not like I'm not aware of that. But I was about 3 drafts in when I realized, oh, wow, these people are all really straight and white. And at that point, I thought, well, I could make somebody a different race or a different ethnicity. And I thought that at that point, that would be just coloring somebody in. You know what I mean? Like just sort of replacing a character with a character of a different color or something. And that to me seemed more like tokenism. But I didn't want to do that. So what I've been trying to do to sort of, I don't want make up for it isn't really the right term, but what I've been sort of trying to do in response is to boost as many authors of color as I can and make sure that those stories are definitely getting as front and center as I can make them, as well as my own. Try to give other people places at the table. But to really answer your question, in a trunked novel that has not sold, and I probably won't, make the rounds, but I had a main character who was Russian. And I did a lot of research. It was part of it took place in like 1980s Soviet Russia. So I did a lot of research as to what life was like then, the mindset of people who lived then, and at the age that person was. And so I tried as much as I could to get into that person's head, and him being Russian, give him the speech pattern that a Russian speaker would have, because I have taken some Russian in the past, so I know a little bit of how the sentence pattern is. So I did that sort of thing. So that was I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
it does. And I mean, I actually like your answer of like not coloring in a character later. I think you're spot on. I remember being a kid and they released like a black Barbie, and it was literally like a white Barbie, but just with brown skin. Like the feature, nothing changed. It was the exact same mold.
Oh,
but it just had brown skin, and we were very aware of this. I remember being very aware of it when I was a kid. My mom was very aware of it, and I feel like it's the equivalent of that, and people would see through that. So, so that's very interesting.
And then another reason too was that I had my mind. I had said before, I was sort of vaguely thinking, well, I could make this into a series, and I feel very strongly that I should not write a POV character who's a different race than me. I don't think that's my place. So that was one reason why the other kind of main supporting characters are all very white, because then I felt like I would be able to write them, if that's, if that makes sense. Because I know there's been a lot of talk about that sort of thing lately too. And so it's something that I've been very conscious of. And I think that to me, that's important. I really think it's much more important for there to be an author of color at the table, a Black author, or, any other, whatever ethnicity they're writing, than me writing a Black character or me writing an Asian character. That to me is important, because that's not my place.
What are some ways, aside from buying your books, that fans of Well Met can support you? Do you do merch? Do you do other stuff? Or do you just write books and the publisher sort of does that stuff?
I just write books. So basically you can order my books. We just said, and I don't know when this is going to air, so I don't know if this will be applicable or not, but we just started a pre-order campaign through One More Page Books in Arlington, Virginia for Well Played. So you'll be able to look them up. You can Google that, and we're doing like a little pre-order campaign where you get like a signed bookmark and a little charm if you pre-order Well Played through their bookstore.
Very cool.
And I definitely support
put that in the show notes so everyone can have a link to.
And I definitely support buying through indie bookstores when you can, rather than Amazon. But no, I just write books. I don't have any merch or anything like that for sale yet. So some things have started to like other people are starting to put some merch out, which has been really the dream. So I've been so thrilled But there have been a couple of like custom candles and some art prints and things like that. And like a headband. There's a headband that was pre-ordered that I'm super excited about. So, but this is just people doing their thing. That's got nothing to do with me.
I think
I
that
love
would be
book merch.
so, like, the day that someone makes Romance at a Glance swag that isn't us, I feel like I'll be like, we made it.
Yeah,
I'll be so
honestly,
excited.
that's been like the thing for me, like that, those things happening. I'm floored every time. I really am.
Yeah, the fan fiction artwork. I always get jealous when I see like influencers and their fans make drawings of them or whatever.
Right.
And I'm always like, that's like the ultimate like what do you call it? Like honor. Like you painted a picture of me. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, like the fact that there's been well met fan art has been, that's been the weirdest feeling, because that was like, oh yeah, like these characters don't just live in my head anymore, because for a long time they did, and I knew what they looked like, but nobody else did. And then somebody else does a picture, and I'm like, oh yeah, that is what they look like. That, like apparently I did a good job of describing these people. It's crazy, because the amount of time it takes to put into creating a piece of art like that. They did that for my book, for my characters. Yeah. That's just, I'm speechless whenever it happens. I really am.
That's so
I appreciate it so much.
That's super awesome. We're like super excited to like follow your journey, follow where you go with your books. We love your writing. We ship you. Yeah. Is that how we use that? Is that how we use that?
No, it's not, Johnny, but I'll
Damn it! It's not, but
I've been on TikTok. I've been trying to figure out what sus is. I've been trying to figure out what ship is.
Oh my God.
Like somebody
ship is like you would ship Emma and Simon together. You're shipping your relationship.
Like a relationship?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll ship you then.
You can tell Johnny does not watch a lot of TV or movies because shipping is big. I just started her on Riverdale, the TV show on the CW.
Did. God.
She forced me.
I'm like, you got to. And she's going to be shipping them so hard because I can already tell. Yeah. She's already like, Bridget, let's watch another episode.
I have not finished that. I've gotten a couple of seasons of that, but I haven't seen all of it.
I haven't either, to be honest. I watched seasons 1 and 2. 3 got real iffy, I thought, so I stopped watching. But apparently 4 was quite good. So we'll see if we can make it all the way through.
I hate when you have to make it. I hate when you have to make it through a bad season of something just to get to the good one. Like,
I feel like you just read a recap and skip it. What are you watching?
There you go. Well, my husband is currently trying to finish Supernatural, which it's like 15 seasons or something. During quarantine, he's watched basically all of Netflix. So there was one time he was getting desperate and trying to find something to watch, and he was flipping through, and he was like, we left off Supernatural somewhere around season 9, and there is now season 15. He's like, I'm going in. So because he stays up really, really, really late, and I go to bed earlier than he does. So there's usually about a good 2 or 3 hour period where he's watching TV. And so that's what he's been doing. He's been trying to burn his way all the way through Supernatural.
I've been trying to do Buffy.
I love Buffy. Because you're doing Buffy, we can be watching Buffy together.
Oh, I need someone to watch Buffy with, because I talk so much shit to myself as I'm watching Buffy. I
own all the seasons on DVD also. Johnny,
I love
Listen, we could have been doing this. Like, I was not allowed to watch Buffy. There's a lot of stuff like everybody was allowed to watch when I was a kid, like The Simpsons and things like that I never saw. So like, I'm an adult trying to like catch up on pop culture. That's why none of these things really, I don't watch movies like that because we couldn't watch movies like that. So I never got into that sort of thing. The only movies I watched were like those epic blockbusters, like Independence Day and stuff like that. So
now I think I understand why you were tearing the romance scenes out of the books in the library.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I understand a lot more about you now.
Oh, yeah.
now you have some given circumstances.
Yep. Now I understand a little more.
Speaking of, are you reading anything good right now? I know you said you're writing, so you're probably deep in writing, but
I am deep in writing. I have a deadline, but I actually just started. This isn't a romance, but I started becoming Duchess Goldblatt, and I don't know if you know who Duchess Goldblatt is on Twitter. But it's this anonymous person who's created this persona of it's from one of the, like an old painting, like an old Dutch painting of an older lady. And she's just created this character called Duchess Goldblatt. And it's just like a persona on Twitter, but it spawned this person writing a memoir of how they came to, become this character and why and everything. And I just started it last night. It's fascinating. And the other thing, I actually have an arc of Christina Lauren's new one in the holidays. So I just started that.
That looks so cute.
So it's so cute so far. It's very funny. So
Nice.
I'm enjoying that one very much. That's what's on my table right now.
I'm waiting to request that because I have your book that was requested, which I'm hoping will drop any day. So I got too many things in my queue. We got 10 historical novels to read for season 4. We got a lot going on.
Bridget reads so many books. In the time it takes me to read like 2 books, Bridget's like, I just read 8 books. Like,
I was laughing because someone posted something about like, oh, they've already read 100 books this year. And I was like, dang, good for them. And then I was like, oh, wait, I've probably at least read like 75. I've already read 4 this week. Like,
I had a hard time reading during like kind of the beginning of all this COVID stuff. Like I would try to read and I would get a page into something. I'm like, nope, gotta put it down. Like I just couldn't focus.
I was so I already worked from home. And I have a baby who's 9 months old now, but was only 5 months old. So I was already in the like, I'm not doing a whole lot right now mindset. Like I also have a 2.5-year-old. So I was already in the like, well, we're home, we're going to hang out. I work when I can, but like I do the podcast and stuff. But so I think it was a little easier for me, like the switch for people who were like out and about in the world or in offices and then came home was like, but I was already kind of like, I mean, it's a bummer we can't like go to Target together and wander the aisles like we used to. Right. But like for the most part, I was breastfeeding.
Life didn't change.
Life didn't change too much. No. But I also found that because my husband was home, his world went completely different from being gone from 8 to 7 every day to being home all the time. And so he was like doing a lot of like stress gaming at night. I ended up reading a ton of books in April because he was like gaming and going through his own mental transition. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll read another alien romance tonight.
Oh, that's too bad.
Shucks. Oh my God. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to read them. Someone has to if you guys are writing the books, someone's got to read them. And that's someone.
Correct.
Hey, man, we appreciate it. You may as well read all of them.
Absolutely. As many as I possibly can. Well, Jen, thank you so much for being on the show with us and talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really fun.
It's always awesome. It's always so fun getting to like, I mean, obviously we've put a face to you because we've seen your picture on the internet, but it's always nice getting to put a personality to the writing.
Yeah.
And, just get to meet the authors of all these books that we're reading. It's super cool. So we really appreciate your time and you coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Subscribe to our channel to get new episodes, clips, and more.
And click here to watch our previous reviews and author interviews.